the Soviet invasion was very important. And when we look at American history books, it is mentioned briefly in a compartmentalized way that it doesn't make sense. So you have to understand the Potsdam position, you have to understand what Truman was thinking and what he knew about the Soviet invasion. He wanted the Soviet invasion when he went to Potsdam. He was all for it. Roosevelt certainly wanted it. It would end the war without American involvement. And it would have ended the war because, frankly, the Soviets wiped out the Kwangtung army. They demolished the 1 million man Kwangtung army in a matter of days in Manchuria. In a matter of days. This is the strongest army Japan had left. It would have been conceivably very little time for the Soviets to reach into Japan itself and take Hokkaido, and this was a big concern of the Japanese War Cabinet. They were terrified and stunned by this invasion. And within a few days, of course, the emperor surrendered, and Soviet Union was effectively cut out of the Japan as a post-war basis for Soviets to operate, and this is what the United States wanted. The Soviets were cut out of the decision-making in the Far East. The United States took control of Japan completely, censored the atomic bombs, and the rest it becomes dirtier and dirtier as the United States uses Japan to fight communism in the Far East, which is what I alluded to on Vietnam. And here we are in Japan now in 2013. It seems like we live too long sometimes. And the story goes on and on and on. And as I've said to the Japanese media, into their face, it seems you people you are like the United States people. You don't know your own history. It's untold. It's unlearned. You went through World War II, and unlike the German people, who at least were re-educated forcibly in Germany, the Germans had an understanding of what happened with Hitler. I don't find that to be true here, except among the more educated Japanese or the more liberal Japanese. There's just no knowledge of it. It's astounding to me. But when I go back to the United States, how can we hold our hand and say, consider ourselves superior, when my own daughter, at 17 years old in a good school in Los Angeles, doesn't really understand what happened in World War II. The myth is the United States. The myth is we ended World War II with the atomic bomb. The truth is we trashed the memory of all the sacrifice that went into World War II from both the Soviet and U.S. sides by resorting to the bomb to end it. It ends it on a dirty note. It sends the wrong message to the world.
I hope that's true, but we don't see a lot of evidence. We're very concerned. A recent poll showed that 51% of American youth between the ages of 18 and 29 say Vietnam was not a mistake. 51%. This is astounding to us. It was 70% of those over 60, but 51% of the younger kids. That just shows us we're losing the fight in some ways. The fight for memory. For us, it's all about history. It's all about memory. It's all about the past. Vietnam, Oliver fought in Vietnam. I fought against Vietnam. He was highly decorated and wounded twice. I got wounded in a number of battles with police during that time. I was very active in the anti-war movement. So we came to this from different sides, but we met in the middle in terms of our views. But Vietnam is central to both of us. And the fact that Americans are losing their understanding of the history of Vietnam bothers us deeply. When Robert McNamara, I often ask my student, how many Vietnamese died in the war? And I usually get 100,000, maybe 500,000. The ones who really know something say 1 million. Robert McNamara came into my class. He was the brains behind the war. And he said that he believes that 3.8 million Vietnamese died in the war. I asked that question, because how would we feel if the average German youth thought that 500,000 Jews died in the Holocaust? I asked my students, how many Jews died in the Holocaust? Every hand goes up, 6 million. They all know that. They think 500,000 Vietnamese died at the hands of their own government, but 6 million Jews died, they know, at the hands of the Nazis. To me, that's very troubling. It's troubling that Americans learn some of this, occasionally the history of other people's atrocities, but they don't learn the history of their own atrocities. The Vietnam Memorial is very powerful. I'm sure most of you have seen it. What it lists is the names of 58,252 Americans who died. The message is that the tragedy of Vietnam was that 58,252 Americans died. What we're calling for is a memorial that lists the names of 58,252 Americans 3.8 million Vietnamese, hundreds of thousands of Cambodians, Laotians, and other people. That's a memorial that says something. Talks about the tragedy, and it's not just a tragedy, it's a crime. The Americans, we talk about the war in Vietnam. We always talk about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, but this is the war in Vietnam. It's sanitized language. It's a battle over language, which Huxley understood, Orwell understood. A lot of it is about language. We don't call it the American invasion of Vietnam. If we called it that, and we talked about the atrocities, we talked about the deaths, then maybe 51% of young people would not think that the Vietnam War was justifiable. But this is the way Oliver and I are trying to fight for an uncorrupted view of history, because we think it's so central to how people understand what the United States and the rest of the world is doing now and will do in the future.